Hello, I'm here with Daniel Pesina, my good friend. I've met him back in 2002. He's trained in Northern Chinese martial arts for a very long time. He's going to tell you a little bit about his teachers. I'm going to tell you a little bit how I met him. We share a common lineage through a master called Wen Jingming. My teacher studied directly under him, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Master Daniel's teacher, directly under him. So that's kind of how we met, and I flew out to Chicago and trained with him for a weekend. Daniel, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, as you said, we share we're cousins. We share a common teacher. Yeah, Wen Jingming and Liu Yihua. They're married, and they were
Hmm.
considered the founding fathers, even though she's a female, of really of Chinese martial arts, what we see today. Because there was a period, when the communists took over and they hunted martial artists, and then anybody who was a martial artist didn't want to come out and do that. But then, later on, when they wanted to embrace Chinese martial arts because of its history and stuff like that, there were five particular founders, and there were two of us were our grandmasters. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Tell me a little. That's a little bit. So the history, as I was told by my teacher, just talk about this real quick, is that Wen Jingming was actually arrested, but because he had bodyguarded the Taiwan president. Am I not mistaken? And then was in
yeah.
prison for a short time for that afterwards.
And also he he did a demonstration at the Berlin Olympics, and later on, even though the government uh, sent him over there, they kind of were really harsh to him, and started to not embrace him. But you know what? It's politics. When you get somebody like him, who is not only bodyguard, he was notoriously known for fighting like old style fighting. You sign the paper, someone's going to die. You jump in the ring, like we always talk about. You jump in the ring. I could come with my hands, and the guy jumps in the ring, and he's got a sword.
Right.
But but the egos are big, and those guys there was no internet, so they're doing martial arts all day long, and they're starting at 4 or 5 years old. So if they're 30 years old, they got a lot of time and hours under their belt, and they don't back down. They don't like, hold on, I don't want to fight you. No, you got a sword. Okay, let's go.
and,
They
that goes to my whole point of, when we look at today, people what's traditional, what's sports, and that's a whole. We'll get into that a little bit later. Um, who were some of your teachers? I know about the one teacher in Chicago, but I don't know your whole
yeah.
like background in learning.
Well, back in the day, first I started off with Shotokan Judo, Shotokan Karate, and then Shotokan Jiu-Jitsu, a little bit of that. Back in those days, I only learned like Jiu-Jitsu. This is how old school it was. I learned Jiu-Jitsu for a year because if you weren't 16, they did not want to teach you joint locking back then.
Huh.
Even back then, when I got a black belt in judo, I wasn't allowed to wear a black belt because I wasn't 18 years old, and they didn't consider me an adult or a man until you're 18. So I had I for a year, before I stopped doing judo and went to kung fu, I wore a brown belt at that time with a red stripe around it.
Mm.
And in that time, for that system, that meant that I knew the requirements to be a black belt, but I wasn't 18 and was not allowed to wear a black belt because I didn't vote, I couldn't serve the country, I couldn't do adult things, I couldn't friggin' pay for my own lessons. My parents were paying for my lessons, so it was like, you're not an adult, you can't wear a black belt
Mm.
back then. But anyway, I started with that, and eventually that that school closed. They were a huge. They had it's back in those days, so they had a lot of schools. But eventually, they closed the school by me, and my father was like, "Hey, I'm going to look for another school because it's really good for you. It keeps you out of trouble.
Mm.
You like it a lot, and And I really did. And he found this guy, Wei Lun Choi, who is uh, who is the grandmaster, which is the lineage holder of Luho Bafa.
Oh,
Later on, yeah,
isn't
later on,
isn't that the same thing that Liang Xiaoyu does too?
yeah, a version of that.
Okay.
Yeah. But later on, this guy, as we talked about, he has the iron body, iron bell
Mm.
too. And, and but later on, Dan and Asano would fly to Chicago to study with Wei Lun Choi.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so he was very, and then Wei Lun Choi won. I know that there's that whole blood sport thing, but he won the Hong Kong Invitational,
Hmm.
where no holds bar. They just wear a chest pad. They have a mouth guard. It's your option if you want to wear gloves. If your option you want to wear shins, and you go at it. So I heard from other students that he won uh, because he did that Luho Bafa, but he also did Xingyi. So sometimes he would be breaking the guy's arms.
uh,
Like they throw a punch and he'd cut through and be able to break their arm.
uh,
You know, so after doing that to a few opponents, nobody would fight him. At least that's what I heard with that. So that guy was pretty much really old school and very much applied his martial art. Like when he was teaching, he was like, "Oh, you got to do this." You got a lot of conditioning.
hmm. I think
So
it's important.
yeah, yeah, it is. So I did that, and then I studied. He kind of semi-retired and would only take private. So, and I couldn't afford it. My parents couldn't afford that. So I wanted to learn more kung fu. So I went to Seven Star Praying Mantis.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, Raymond Lai, uh, who was Chu Chi Man's one of Chu Chi Man's disciples out of Hong Kong. This guy was a enforcer for the tongue for the triad. So he too would be that old time school training because he used it. So a lot of I really like live because and everything you he would ask you to do he would do with you
Hmm.
two or more. So sometimes we're doing like just example push-ups. We're going to do 100 push-ups. Everybody there has to do 100 push-ups, whether it's on their knees or on their hands, however they can do it. And when we reach 100, everybody stops, but he just keeps going. So everything he would always go. You hold a horse stance, he would hold it longer. You're going to do shin conditioning against plum flower pole, and you're kicking it light. He would kick it harder, and he would do more. And so he was very inspirational in his training because it was like, man, he just always does more. You know, trying to teach you to do more and more and more. And then after that, eventually I got to go to China, mainland China, because that opened up in '85, and I got to study with uh, uh, Wang Jing Wang Jinzheng, uh, guy out of China. He was actually Jet Li's first instructor.
Oh
Uh,
okay.
yeah, he went to actually he
Not
went to
moving his first instructor.
his official first instructor. Then they gave him to Wu Bin for the Chinese team, but that guy went to jail because he was speaking, politically was speaking out, and so they were like, well, we can't really do too much for him because he's a national hero, and they took all his students and gave them to different instructors. If you watch videos of Jet Li, they said he started at 12. He really started when he was 7. They just wiped out his martial art history because it's what was with this guy, because that guy was punished for what he was saying against the government.
Well, that's just like when we look at Wen Jingming, him being put in political, when you think about a lot of these political dissidents that were talking against the Chinese government during that time, especially the Cultural Revolution, those early times, and even you see it today is going on where billionaires are disappearing,
Yeah,
um, that they usually died, they usually killed them, but they never killed these martial arts instructors because I think they knew if they did, they offed them, they'd have a real problem on their hand that people would revolt because they looked at them, going back to the word, the traditional, instead of using Lao She, using the word Shifu, which meaning old term for father, in the way that they viewed that you killed their dad and we're coming after you. So
Yeah,
I think that's one of the things that you'll see is a lot of these martial artists that real prominent, famous, martial artists that spoke against the government. They didn't they didn't offer them. Oh, we're going to put you in jail. Okay, you're out of jail now. Go teach at college. Don't
right.
talk to them. And that's
Yeah.
basically what they did.
Yeah, that's what they did to him. Yeah,
Yeah.
they did to him too. You know, when I have discussions before with these guys, it was like that was the whole. You know, that's why we see what we do see today with contemporary wushu. It's still kind of founded in traditional martial arts, but they took it out because it is China. So as you said, if 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 you wanted to overthrow the government, which happened a lot, the dynasties before, it was easy to find an army because 1 out of 5 knew martial arts, you know, and out of those 5, one of those guys was a badass. So you can get an army really quick who can follow military procedures. If you wouldn't have to explain flanking maneuver or hey, we're going to spearhead. No, those guys already knew. And those guys already had the discipline to be like, okay, I'm going to be first. If I die, that's not a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's military.
Or I might not die. I may just be wounded and survive. So there's always that
Yeah,
aspect because
yeah, and keep
we're
fighting.
fighting with edged weapons or piercing weapons versus a ballistics, like with a handgun or firearms. The ballistic damage that it does is greater than if I shot you with an arrow. Good chance you could survive if I shot you with an arrow.
Yeah,
If I shot you with a bullet, because of the ballistic force that it's hitting you with, the fragmentation of the round, it's a little bit different. And so that's where when we look at how warfare has changed. That even goes into my biggest thing is when we look at traditional martial arts and you take those people from old and think that they fought because they look at the one of the things that modern people see that they because they haven't trained in this is they watch these videos of when they watch the old Hong Kong reel to reel black and white no sound and they're like doing stuff like that fighting each other and you're like well make it look like something like boxing and if you look at them and they're actually hitting each other pretty hard and they're not falling they're not going down they'll they come right
yeah,
after you. So they were a lot of that was probably one way of propagandizing or trying to make it more of a sport for using Chinese martial arts to make because you didn't see them poke into the eye, you didn't see him trapping and grabbing an arm and breaking it, you didn't see him doing that. They were probably told don't do that, you know
yeah.
use your fist, use your arms, things like that. But
Yeah,
and so
because
that
even his instructor Liu Chung Lee was one of the people who fought against like not only the Japanese, but you see his name associated with Xingyi, Bagua, all the other Big Spear Liu nickname. So it was those guys were really serious and two, it's just people forget like to look at the whole overview of the control of Chinese martial arts. So a lot of people, some people I know are like, oh, there's no historic reference here and there. You got to remember the communists burned all those books.
wiped it out.
Yeah, wiped it out. But there are cave drawings
Hmm.
that are showing that martial arts were being organized back in the day, just like it was across the whole world. So
Is they would refer to this particular famous martial artist as a particular name, but there wasn't any writing about what he did or how he did it or whatever. And it was like he was, Eagle Claw Chow, and so he must have been known for grappling. And so again, this is a jiu-jitsu guy who studied, or praying mantis guy who studies jiu-jitsu now. Uh, you know, drank the Kool-Aid for MMA and is trying to revisionist history. And I'm like, time out. Just because they called him Miyu Claw Joe doesn't mean he was a grappler and rolled around on the ground like Gracie Jiu Jitsu. I'm sorry. In combat, go ahead. Roll around on the ground while I'm running around swording people. Oh, you're fighting my buddy. Oh, let me stick you. It's just not, it's not done. And also, if you get rolling around on the ground, even on a one-to-one combat, fingers in the eye, this is for real. This
Yeah,
isn't
I'll
me
bite
trying to
you.
submit you.
Yeah. Shifu, I'll bite you. I'll freaking bite your throat.
Right.
You
So,
know, Wen Jingming, Wen Jingming once said, don't fight if you're not prepared to die or kill someone.
right. If you're not prepared, that's why
Yeah.
I said,
So there was no, oh, we're going to have a friendly match.
no.
No, you want to fight, somebody's going to die. That there is no sport. Oh, no, when you do this stuff, you're going to go in and kill somebody. You know, if you're going to be reaching, don't be surprised if I grab your finger and break it and then punch that hand. You know what I mean? To compound fracture it and then go from there, because it doesn't stop until somebody's dead. You
Yeah,
know?
it's the same concept of when we're in law enforcement. We use the term shoot to stop, but I keep shooting you until you stop.
Right.
You're not moving. It's not about killing you, but in the same concept, I'm not going to stop hitting you in the barrage of attack or whatever it is until you stop.
Yeah,
It,
because if you're on drugs, the one slug might not slow you down, even if it's even if you get, this, it's craziness.
yeah.
It really is dangerous.
And what does traditional martial arts mean to you? When you say that, when you hear that, what do you think? What do you think it is? Tell me a little bit about that.
Traditional martial arts is an organized martial arts, meaning when I hear traditional martial arts, it means it's going to cover A to Z.
Mm.
And it's going to be like little a, little a, and you're going to do that all the way down, because it's like learning how to cook. You don't just take a piece of meat and just throw it on the fire unless you really had to. You're going to season it, you're going to cook it. Do you want barbecue? Do you want, how you want, what? Oh, teriyaki. You're going to cook that basic piece of meat different ways. And so when I hear traditional martial arts, it is really not only like the form and the spirit, it's the whole set. Do you do, if you do traditional martial arts, you should be doing the conditioning, not only running and lifting weights and doing like that. Are you hitting the iron bag? Are you banging your shin to condition your shin? Are you bumping like trees? You know what I mean? Are you doing all that? And I think that's a big thing that contemporary martial arts today, like uh, uh, we forget that there's still not a lot, but there's still guys out there and girls out there who do this stuff, who do like hit. Guess what? We're going to go up and I'm going to punch this tree all day long. Not all day long, but I'm going to punch this tree. And when I mean punch the tree, you don't have to hit it like 100%. If you hit a tree 20, 30% for 10, 15 minutes, your punch is going to be dense. Your bones are going to be dense. And then you're clawing the tree. And then even if it's not, like I said, 100%, if you're used to poking something hard like a tree and I poke you in the eyes, I'm gonna freaking poke out your eyeballs, So you have that when you do traditional martial arts, it encompasses all that. And as far as like a lot of them have forms and stuff like that. And I view forms, for me when I teach, because not everyone that I teach is looking to use it in combat.
Right.
Some people do it for the art. But what I think I've discovered is I teach a lot of forms to find a way in for you to get it. Because if I teach a form one way, you only learn it one way. But if I teach it a different form, like a different form of Bengbo, as we were talking before, I learned like 4 or 5. It's a different viewpoint. You get a little different viewpoint, and finally you're like, well, wait a minute, I get it. Holy crap! So learning forms is a way to teach students of how to different points of view of how to get it. You might learn this way, you might learn that way. I might have to come and teach you this way or that way. So for me, when I hear traditional martial arts, that encompasses embracing everything that it has. If the style and system you're teaching has 5 forms, then you should teach all those 5 forms and help your student figure out what he's going to need, because you won't need 1,000 techniques, but you the guy who only needs one technique has already learned 100,000 techniques. So it's not like, oh, I just learned one technique. No, you experienced everything to get what is good for you.
Right.
And what is good for you, if you have 100 things, you're going to get 10. But if you have 1,000 things, then you might get 50. And in combat, hand-to-hand combat, you need a lot of different techniques, a lot of different situations. Not one joint lock. You can't learn one wrist lock and think that's going to solve everything. No, you got to have wrist lock this way, wrist lock this way, wrist lock where you're using the elbow lock, and you just kind of right there, you're already up to like just basically up to like 12 different joint locks.
Right.
At base, So
Speaking
yeah,
about joint locks, one of the big things is that we were talking about earlier with a guy who's trying to revisionist, saying that basically whittling it down because of the names meant they grappled. Oh, because he did this, he grappled. Because he was named this, he grappled. So when we look at the Chinese grappling, and one of the things that they always said is wrestling's been around for eons, and I'm like, okay, when they were wrestling in the arena, uh, in the whatever in Rome, it was probably life and death. But if they were wrestling, it was probably competition wise for a submission. But if they threw swords, a tiger, it's a little bit different on how they're fighting or doing that particular arena sport that they were doing. And when you go back and look at a lot of these other cultures that have developed wrestling, it's always been a way for them to compete in a sport or friendly match. Even though somebody gets hurt, it's usually not to the death. It was friendly. There were somewhat of rules, and it was just a way for them to do that without having to be on the battlefield and use something to break somebody's arm for real. So that gets me into like we were talking when you were talking about the Chinaz and using it with Chinese wrestling, not to confuse it with Mongolian wrestling, such as the Swai Jiao and stuff. But that's a form of wrestling where I think that most Chinese martial arts that I've seen have some form of Qinao or joint locks, as you were saying, grabbing. You got to learn. Can't just learn one way. I got to learn all the different angle articulations of that particular joint in wrestling. And so I think today some of that's confused in um, the masses looking at, oh, y'all they've always wrestled, they've always done grappling, but Gracie Juso is corner of the market, whatever. It We've had that, but we used it in a different way. So when you're looking at when I'm seizing, like in Kao Shao, when we're doing the break,
yeah,
I've grabbed and circled the arm, but I've taken the elbow, I've taken that opponent's elbow as like a lever and
yeah,
smacked it.
yep,
And so we've always had it, and most martial arts teach it. But I think that's been lost in translation today, big time.
yeah, yeah. Two, people forget that historians are good at writing and not at martial arts.
Right.
So when they see they're wrestling. No, he doesn't know he wouldn't know what style they're doing. And two, if I punch you and then grab you and joint lock you and throw you, then you're like, oh, he wrestled. Well, you didn't really see the punch, or you didn't see the strikes, so it's not really, you're talking about historians who are not martial artists or not in proficient in martial arts, talking about a subject that they're trying to kind of describe. So other people are like, oh, sure, wrestling's been around. So is like punching, kicking, everything's been around for thousands of years.
It's that lost in translation when you look at the writing that supposedly doesn't exist. When they're trying, the Chinese have their anagram of a word where any Chinese person would look at that and go, oh, I get that. Know exactly what they're talking about. When we see it and they try to translate it to us, we're trying to put it in pull from our box what frame of reference that is. And is that wrestling? Oh, it's wrestling. Wrestling. It's
Yeah,
wrestling.
yeah, and two, not to downplay MMA, because I like to watch it. It's cool. It's a cool sport. They're athletic. Sometimes their personalities are too big, but hey, in football and baseball, same thing. It's a sport. The first time I saw, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, I was like, I saw them shoot in. This was back in, man, I forget the 90s, 80s, something like that. The 90s, yeah. And then I was like, man, that is really clever. So when I went to talk to my master, Go Jinhua, Wen Jingming's student, I was like, hey, I watched Ultimate Fighting. He's like, Ultimate Fighting? And he's like, cool. And he goes, what'd you see? And then I was like, oh, I'm going to catch him. I'm going to fake and dive in and grab his legs, just to kind of, I learned something and I want to show it off and not tell him I learned this. You want to see? He was like, yeah. And there's another student next to me, and he was like, yeah, it was really cool to watch him. It was good. And so I fake up and I go to shoot in fast, and he grabbed me under the jaw and by this and before I could get in, started twisting my neck, and I let go and I screamed. I was like, ah, like this. And the guy started laughing, and then Go looked at him and he goes, no, Master Go, you're not supposed to kill him. And then he's like, well, why would you call it Ultimate Fighting? And then the other guy was like, who's older? He was like, no, it's like tournament to make money. And he's like, oh, make money. It's Chinese. He's like, that's really good. He goes, but you Americans are silly. Why would you call it ultimate if I can't kill you?
Mm-hmm.
But it would just kind of, like you said, the eye gouge and stuff like that. Sure, other martial arts, all traditional martial arts have an eye gouge, but you really have to know that, there is a difference between combat art and sport art. There truly is.
Definitely. Well, getting into my next question is, we were talking about forms earlier. When you're teaching a form to somebody, let's just take Kao Shao, and it that being what we could consider to be like a track system or a track style. Do you think of the techniques of being like ABC 1 2 3, or more of like an algebra? I can take all of this and put in any sequential order that I need to make whatever sentence or problem that I want.
Yeah. A lot of people, you know, even my instructors taught me. I was like, one day, I'm just moving around doing things, Fanzitun, Kaosho, part of that system. I was like, it's pretty. Uh, Go was like, remember, kind of circle. Even though the strikes are going straight, you're always circling around. And then I was just like, well, why is the form straight? And then he was like, well, if I'm teaching 50 people, everybody has to go straight. Otherwise, I can't watch them all. Otherwise, you guys are idiots and you'll be running into each other. And he goes, so it's hard to teach if you're not going in straight in the same direction. How am I going to teach? I can't track it, And so he's like, so imagine China, hundreds. So all the forms are straight back and forth because it's just easier to teach. Two, he's like, he goes, right now, you already know A, B, C, but you only know C spot run. I want to teach you a deeper vocabulary. So when you get this thing, then I will break it down in a different way to keep accelerating until you get an idea of how to use it. But it teaches you how to fight, but doesn't dictate how you fight.
Right. So
Yeah.
you mentioned that circular thing that brought up a real good point, because I instant remember, I guess when it clicked, like back, we're talking years ago. So I was learning the Sa-Tren, the Fourth Road, Sir Louis Sa-Tren.
Okay.
And so in one of them, it's like here, where it goes up, under, and you're like this. And when you look at it, if I'm doing it linear, it doesn't work, because when you look at where you're targeting, it you can't hit that. You can't hit that target area, because if you were in a linear side by side, you haven't turned or did that small circle to get to the inside to get to the vulnerable areas. It doesn't work. So when Miyahara Sensei was teaching me the actual the applications and stuff of this, it was like you had that small circle put into where now it was like you hit, but then you're stepping as you're pulling out and hitting. I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
the light bulb goes off in a sense of how that translates. And I've never really, until you just said it, now thought about how to put that to somebody. Like,
yeah,
teaching it linear, it makes sense because now I can watch a mass amount of people or even one person and I'm tracking. Because if you're going in a circle, I have to move with you to see what you're doing. If I was teaching
yeah,
you a form, it's
yeah.
a little bit different. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. When
Yeah, it really does too. You have to understand. A lot of people forget like that traditional martial arts. It usually takes about 7, 8 years to get to be able to use it in a practical sense to that. Meaning, like traditional martial arts is used to fight another martial artist, not to get in a bar fight
right,
or not to really fight a brawler. You're going to get a professional soldier fighting a professional soldier. So that's why it takes like everybody's like, oh, it's only not practical if you're not using it for what it's really meant for, the warfare, to
hmm
actually really, really fighting. Sure, you can borrow things out of that and use it for self-defense, but this was more like, you know, uh, Master Go once told me, he's like, you know what? It's really about taking shit or not taking shit. And I kind of looked at him. He goes, okay, we ride into your village. We want your crops. We want to just take your shit, but you don't want us to take your shit. So then farmers can't really match people who practice all day long
right.
warfare. So I hire my warfare guys to guard us so that way you don't take our shit. And so now you have that whole mercenary professional soldier thing going on. And he's like, really, he goes, there's no farmer who became a warrior. He goes, that's like not right. You can't, you get 5 farmers attacking one guy, no matter what, if whether it's Japanese, Thai, Korean, Chinese, anything. No, those guys will handle those 5 guys because that's what they do. They know how to fight. And guess what? Your 2 hour a day practice is not equivalent to his 6, 7 hour a day practice over a
Not just
period of time.
practice, but practical practice.
Yeah. Yeah, because the master, we're old school. My instructor hit me
Yeah,
because it's easier. The correction comes quicker if you get hit, if there's a consequence. You know what I mean? Oh, I don't, if my chin is a pap, oh, tuck my chin. Yeah, I don't want to get hit again.
that's
So
like
it's like, oh, you
me
learn
and Hannah
things.
told me a story about training with Wen Jingming, and it was about the idea is to train to train the shoulder so you don't see the shoulder and
Yeah.
how to block it and not move your head, but use your hand and for that timing. And he said he was moving his head, and he goes okay, and so all of a sudden it came out really quick, and he popped him in the face and popped him in the nose, and he's like, "What the Miyahara was like, what in the world?" He goes, "Stop moving your head. Your timing isn't right. You're not training your eyes correctly, and so you're never going to see this coming, and you're going to get hit in the face. I don't care how fast you move your head. You've got to train your eye." And he's like, "Oh, so that pain helped him go, oh shit, let me start focusing on what I need to be and the timing of when that hand's coming out, it was actually more of a forward move, and that's how we learned it. So at first, I remember I was doing like that, but when we did it, it was like I'm timing that punch coming, and I'm not moving my head. I'm actually moving your hand, but I'm moving my face forward
Yeah.
because I'm
Dude, yeah. That makes sense too, because you're, how can they call it's like a torpedo. A
right.
torpedo has that thing that hits you like here, but if you move forward, dink, you know what
Yeah,
I mean? In the old days, before it was armed, you blocked it. So you moving forward could get it before it was armed, which makes perfect sense, you
that
know?
goes in like you see those old masters get hit in the chest or whatever they're being punched, and I can do like that, and I basically have you're sensing your body, your timing, and all that stuff to maybe the averagely trained person. Um, it will take or dissipate the power whether I pull away. So I pull away from it. That takes the power away, or if I go into it, it stops the power short. But if someone is trained on that Fa Jing, they understand that, and they at that millisecond, because they're watching and they're timing as well. They're able to go, oh shit, he's changing his distance. He's
Yeah.
changing it somehow. So I've got to adapt and change to make it be powerful. And
Yeah.
that gets into the Fajing, meaning kinetic linking and stuff for people that are listening when we're talking about that. It's
Yeah.
kinetic linking is what we're talking about.
Yeah. That's why it's a lot bigger picture than what people think, because when you're training, when you're going at somebody who has a skill, it is totally, as you know, it's totally different than somebody who doesn't have skill. You know, we were talking about before, like the iron body. You got to sense it and then punch it, and that's why back in the day when I did praying mantis, I would have to go like this: 1, 2, 3. Use the ox jaw. Boom, 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 boom.
Mm-hmm.
And we were training that with the praying mantis guy because he had iron body. So he's the one who taught, was like, so if you encounter somebody with iron body, you have to be able to force the sense, punch through, hit it, and you might have to penetrate it again depending on how well they condition. So in the end, it comes back to that whole thing that we're talking about. It's traditional martial is really the conditioning. Are you hitting are you hitting 50 pounds of iron pellets? Are you whacking conditioning your shin? Are
Right.
you bumping your shoulder? Heck, are you even like, squai when I took a little bit of squai you do the body bumping, but then I turn and then I lean my head on the pole, boom. And I'm learning like, oh, you got to use a headbutt.
How would you compare the MMA BBJ today to your view on it from traditional to a sport? What would you see? What's the big comparison between the two? If I were to, the the jiu-jitsu of today. I'm not talking about old school Japanese jiu-jitsu. I'm talking about the Gracie jiu-jitsu MMA that we see today compared to a traditional. We talked a little bit about that. Tell me some more comparisons that you would use on that, or how you would view it
I
today.
would, I would view it, it's cool to watch and stuff like that. But you know, my thinking is it doesn't teach spirit. Like we have a human spirit where if you focus on, when you focus on purely sport, you are, because you don't have that consequence of maybe the guy kills you. You could come back and you can learn from that. You have an opportunity to learn from the mistake and come back and re-challenge that guy. And it's cool that you have the sport thing. But in the old days, you didn't have that. If it failed on you at that moment, you wouldn't really be able to run away and practice again. Usually, you die
Yeah.
with the sport. But two, that teaches you a mental aspect when it's traditional. If I'm going to fight you, I might not get the opportunity to fight you again. So I'm going to try to fight you like the hardest I can, and the respect. You're If I'm fighting you, I know that you also, Wen Jingming once said, like, he's like, you know what? You train every day, and the day you went to see your girlfriend, the guy that you're facing didn't take that day off, and he trained that day. So now you're going to be fighting another guy, trained martial artist, and that day you skip, he trained. So you cannot give him any opportunity. Don't be cocky. Don't get the business done. He goes, it's about you going home or him going home, and that is it. And that's that whole talk about, if you're going to fight, be prepared to die. And I think that the sport thing takes that mental equation out of it.
Hmm.
So I think, not that you should always fight, you know, not that you should embrace violence, but that when you do traditional martial arts, even if you're doing it casually, kind of feel that spirit, get that spirit and respect. You respect your opponent, you respect yourself. You don't have to go up to the guy and headbutt him and be like, oh, I'm stronger than you and stuff like that. And no, it's intimidation. But no, that guy's in the ring for a reason. So they need to. For me, when I see the MMA, they don't, at least the newer stuff. They in the days first of MMA, they had a lot of guys who would show respect to their
Hmm.
opponent. But now it's like it's very lacking. And that's not good for the human spirit, I think.
Well, that leads me into my next question. Is I think over the years I've seen a decline of traditional martial arts being taught. I mean, real traditional martial arts being taught, and of people are now training MMA stuff and not training traditional martial arts. And let me get your perspective on what you see as why it declined and what your views are on that.
Yeah, yeah. My view is like it's what it all it's life. It's about money. They propagated that so that way they can be in charge and really make money because they made tons of money on the tournaments. Their schools make a lot of money. It's and too in the end it turns to money. But the decline of traditional martial arts is because it's a dinosaur. Nobody, not nobody, but it's a rarity for me to find a student who wants to hit the bag, who wants to be like, go, iron palm bag, go just whap it. Even, yeah, you know what? At the beginning, just hit it soft. Sure, everybody at the beginning feels really cool, but then they don't want to do it. Oh, it hurts my hand. No crap. It's good. Don't hit it as hard, but you have to hit it every day. There is no rest from that. And that is part of that traditional martial art learning. And if you don't do that, and then your traditional martial arts don't work, you know why. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? You don't have that firepower that the traditional martial arts requires. You don't have that endurance. It's important to do the sparring and things like that. And finding out, like, guess what? You can take a blow. When somebody punches you, sure, it hurts. It hurts everybody. But if you have that traditional martial spirit, it doesn't put you down. It doesn't make you lose your head. You have to, you lose your head, you lose your life.
Right.
So the traditional martial arts, really, the whole structure is about all those little elements, but in order to understand them, you have to recognize them, not necessarily that you have to hit the iron palm bag every day or things like that, but know when you have a strike, well, this strike is useless. Well, yeah, because you've never hit the bag. You know what I mean? You've never developed that smashing power of the palm. Right now, you hit with your fingers and it's a slap. No, if I hit you, like if I shape my hand like in Pequot and I really hit like this, you're all like, yeah, especially across here. Oh, I'm gonna break your neck. Well, but you can't do that unless you hit the bag or hit a beam or hit a tree or do the conditioning that traditional martial arts requires. So I think that it is a decline because who wants to do that? It's not who wants to. That's a pain in the ass. Because then you got to go to work 8 or 9 hours, but then you got to train 4 hours, and then you got to then you got to see your girlfriend, wife, boyfriend, whatever you're doing, and that's 4 or 5 hours. So that type of training is really obsolete for some people.
Yeah, it's at like when I look back at my just talking about the time training. I sat down one day, my training in Japan, and it averaged out to about 5 hours a day, 6 days a week that I was training when I was over there. I mean, it was literally I would get off work Monday, basically almost Monday through Saturday. I would get there at 7 and wouldn't leave until like midnight or 1 o'clock, depending, and it would fluctuate depending on what I knew I had the next day or if I had something to do. But it averaged out to about 5 hours a day, 6 days a week, and some of those days were longer, like on the weekends, like from Friday to Saturday. Those days I typically trained longer on those days with my
Yeah,
teacher. It was definitely people, you got to be willing to put in that kind of time, and I was
yeah,
just able to. I was in the right place, right time, and right frame of mind to be able to do it, which I don't. I guess my frame of mind today is not as hardcore as it was back then.
yeah.
Um,
But that's not what too. At a certain level, you don't need that hardcore training. Like hit like uh I don't do hit like that iron pound bag or I have a 50-pound bag of iron pellets that I use as a heavy bag to kick and punch and use elbows. So I
mhm.
don't hit that hard every day, but I do it maybe every other day except for Saturday and Sunday. So I do it like 3 or 4 times a week just to keep that feeling. You know what I mean? When you hit stuff like that, and
A lot of people like with the iron palm. So looking at it, just talk a little bit about that. And from my perspective, I come from an iron palm lineage from Brian Gray. a guy I do not respect, but he does know his stuff when it came to the Iron Palm. And looking at it, it goes to what's called Wolf's Law. Clarify for some of our viewers of Iron
Yeah,
Palm how it works. It's not some mystical, I'm actually doing something that's physiologically changing the density of my bone through conditioning. It's like taking old people that have osteoporosis and getting them into a weight bearing style exercise that causes their bones to flex or couple because the muscles pulling against the bone. The body senses that and starts making the bone become denser. So no magic to that at all. Just so for the
yeah.
viewers.
And that is this the mysticism of martial arts, is that you did not see me train hitting that bag for an hour a day for 5 years.
Right.
And then all of a sudden I hit somebody and you're like, oh my God, it's chi. And then I might be in smartass and go, yeah, it is chi. Just to be a smartass.
Yeah.
That's because sometimes, being this physical stuff makes you a smartass. But but it isn't. That's yeah. It's because I have a mysterious power of training that particular thing, of training 5 hours a day for 10, 15, 20 years. That is, because in the end, that is a kind of a mystical power. Because what kind of person does that? Like us. What kind of person would take 5 hours and be like, oh, hey, you want to go out tonight? No, I got to go train. Oh, you want to do this? No, I got to go train. No, nobody wants to do that.
Even if you look at the MMA guys in their sport, they're training 3, 4, 5 hours a day, to get their skills. And again, I don't. It's no disrespect to what I say to their sport and what they do, because if I were putting, like I've always said, if I was put in their box and put under their rules where I'm not able to use the things that I do, I probably wouldn't fare well. Just like if I take them out of their box and stick them in my box, we can do whatever. It's going to be a different game, a different outcome. And so these guys, coming from that background and actually doing the kickboxing in Japan and stuff and putting in that time and training, I no disrespect to their sport, don't disrespect traditional martial arts unless you're willing to back it up. And that leads me into my next question. Do you think MMA has exposed traditional martial arts to be, not realistic, not practical? Uh,
I think that MMA has exposed martial artists who don't really train it completely. They don't have any. They don't take any time. Not that you should be beating each other to a pulp. Hard practice, two-person practice is good if you have two people who want to do that. But some people don't want to do that. But now you're subtracting. Don't be alarmed if your martial art doesn't work against another martial artist if you don't do that type of training. Meaning, like, I see these guys who say Tai Chi, oh, this Tai Chi master. When I look and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. You're not a Tai Chi master, because that's, when I met like my Tai Chi master, he was a master, because he was like, man, that guy he was old. He was already in his 80s, and the first time that he was like, okay, let's move around. And I was like, oh, Tai Chi. And I got in, I got into my position because I did some sanda, and then he freaking slapped the top of my hand, which I wasn't expecting. Boom. And I was just like, oh, it freaking hurt, shocked my elbow, because I was loose and I was like, I'm going to fight Tai Chi. But and then I was like, and he's like, oh, that's the beginning of Part the Wild Horse's Mane. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I thought it was all just pushing, shoving, feeling energy, wrestling. And he's like, no, it came from Dong Bei. He goes, what does Dong Bei do? And I was like, oh crap. Yeah, exactly. Just because I'm doing this slow and going like this doesn't mean I'm just waving my hands. That means I'm doing, I'm whacking you with my forearm and gripping you with my head. So that way, when I go like this, I twist your neck and I could deliver an elbow, which would completely snap your neck. You know what I mean? So I was just like, oh, it's not what I perceived, just because they're going slow. But if you don't practice it like that and know that, then it could fail you. So it has exposed traditional martial artists, but not traditional martial arts.
Okay.
because if you're going to step in, you got to do the conditioning. You got to get kicked in the thighs. You got to do the leg conditioning. Have somebody kick you. You got to freaking bang your shins. You know what I mean? You got to go like this and take your cover up and have somebody, pummel you a little bit and give you that durability that you need to step into the ring. And these guys are not doing that. And then they make us look bad because all of a sudden I'm like, no, don't step in the ring. What the heck? Oh, I could already see that you're not prepared, you know?
So that's like with me in Okinawa. I fought in there's basically K1 style kickboxing stuff, and all amateur, no pro stuff. But I did that because it was the only place I could put myself where I could say, okay, see, this guy's trying to knock my block off. He's really trying to kick me and hurt me. So, I can't train, the stuff that I was training. Like, first of all, I can't grab you because I'm in boxing gloves. So that
Yeah.
takes out a whole component of what we do. We weren't allowed to elbow at all. I did the baji, so that takes out a whole component of stuff. So I had to put myself in that box, and I took myself for about, I want to say about 6 months before I actually started getting like, okay, I'm going to start competing in it. I did several matches, but I took 6 months to, okay, I need to see what they do and start training that. And so getting that aspect of it, of what you were saying about, stepping in the ring, but I stepped in playing their box. I didn't step in trying to do what I do and say it's going to work. It's like the dude from, and again, the people that he's picking, the guy from China who's the MMA guy going around beating up all the masters,
Yeah.
he's not choosing the Wen Jingmings.
No, no, they kill him because
he,
really,
he,
yeah. When
he's choosing the lightweights. He's not choosing the big guys.
Yeah, and you know what? When I was training in China and doing some Dongbei, I trained with Yang Man. I don't even know, I can't remember his first name. But anyway, I'm waiting for him in the park. It's like 6 o'clock in the morning. We're waiting in the park, and I see him pulling. What he has is he took. He's like, oh, this. He was telling me how conditioning. He took a flower pot, a round flower pot. He poured cement in that, and then he put a pole in that, let it dry, and then broke the flower pot. And basically, he has a weeble made out of
Yeah,
a piece of
that's how
wood.
they do that. I didn't know how. I've seen them before. I didn't know how they made them.
Yeah. So I see him pulling his cart, and I'm just looking at him and say, who would ever thought? Here's this Dung Bay badass guy. Looks like, he's got his trousers almost up to his chest. He looks like he could not do anything to anyone. And he's carrying this thing. And I'm like, and then I'm just kind of laughing. I was like, you know what? If he was back in America, somebody would pick on him, and then he'd hit you, and then you'd die. And
Yeah.
then you wouldn't, and then that'd be it. So he's showing me this stuff, how to train on this thing. And he's like, it'll toughen your bone really big. And we're in a park in China, and he goes over to it was like a square guard for the pagoda. It's a piece of marble,
Mm-hmm.
marble, which is about chest high. But he's like, you'll develop power. And then he hits this marble, and a piece of it cracks off. And I was just like, whoa. And he looked at me. He's like, oh, we got to go. We got to go. And I was like, well, what happened? He goes, they're going to make me pay to repair this. So he got this little dummy thing. And then we're going to a different part of the park. But I was just like, and people could be like, oh, it's partially crack or illegal. But man, he let go on this. Like, it would sound like if you took a piece of steak and threw it on a counter, whack. You hear that whack. And he hit that like whack. And that piece went down. And I was like, holy cow, it's amazing how the human body can, with time, can really do that stuff. Who in the heck would want to do that? But he did that. He showed him benefit. And then we were just talking. He was like, no, just don't get near me. He goes, don't let me. You have to do footwork. Your footwork's important for me to not unload that on you. He goes, because I guarantee if I hit you in the side of the head with that, your head's going to pop. Yeah.
Knock you the hell out.
Yeah.
That's a what I was going to say. That's a whole nother thing about when we talk about the conditioning and stuff like that. The martial arts that we see today, they don't They don't condition like that. Like,
Yeah,
I was taught to hit. When I started learning Baji, it was like, here's a tree.
yeah, yeah,
Boom,
yeah.
boom.
Yeah,
Hit the tree.
and you're
Hit,
doing it
hit,
all day long because the guy's just looking at you.
yep.
You
And
know,
we would do it
it's
on.
not.
We also trained it on each other, like two people. You
Yeah,
know, hitting each other with shoulders into the
yeah.
chest and learning how to take that and to condition the body. So I don't see a lot of that. Here's just a question. It's not on the questions I was going to ask you, but compared to your learning and seeing stuff here in the States and seeing stuff in China, how would you compare the two?
None, none comparison whatsoever. Because nobody, it's a rarity to see anybody wanting to do that. MMA has that to some degree, but not even. They don't even do 20% of what would be required to learn a traditional martial art you know, back in that. You do hit the heavy bag, but you have to hit the iron pellets. You kick the heavy bag, but you have to get the steel brush and whack your
Mm-hmm.
shins, and then you got to roll them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know what's worse: whacking your shins with the iron brush or rolling the pin up and down that, because your instructor too is watching you do that, and he knows when you're not doing it hard. And you don't want him to come up and do that, because you're going to really freaking cry if he has to come up and do that, because he's going to teach you a lesson. Because too, their thought frame of a lot of the old instructors is, you're going to need this. Even, and we don't really need this now in this day and age, but they think that, sure, you're going to need this. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to need that condition. This stuff is going to save your life one day, and that's just obsolete now. So that conditioning and stuff like that, we're talking about, if you're stepping into the ring, you have to do the conditioning. If you're going to represent traditional martial arts, you have to do the traditional martial arts training conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you're going to look bad, and people are going to think like, oh, like he's exposing, oh, look, this stuff isn't practical. A lot of people think it's impractical, but it's not impractical, because it has killed people. It has served this purpose and killed people for over 2,000 years. So it's worked for 2,000 years. Why isn't it working now? Because there's some elements that are no longer being, added to that training. So it's not working because it's not complete.
Right. That exactly. I would say that a lot of my big comparison from learning overseas and then learning here, and even when I went to China, is when I moved back to the States in 2002. It was almost like, what the hell? I mean, I like you. Like, what are you guys doing? Because I had gotten so engrossed in training that way, even in Okinawa, like traditional Okinawa martial. These guys train, a lot of them, not all, but a lot of them train hardcore. Like, they get off work, they go do their hardcore training, and they go back to the office the next day. There are some of them, those kind of people over there, and it exists. Going to China and just some of the ways they were training, watching them, hitting trees, and they were hardcore. And then I came back here and I'm like, what in the world? And that's where I see the decline in traditional martial arts. Is it makes me almost wonder. So if we look back at Bruce Lee, the Kung Fu theater, we're talking about the 70s and early 80s. You had a lot of immigration of maybe people coming in from China, Hong Kong, and those type of areas, moving here in the United States. I don't know if their level of skill was that high.
No.
I think it was they were very low. They were like the low level student that learned under this particular master, and then they came to the United States and then started teaching, and they just didn't have a full understanding or viewed the Americans as being weak, so they didn't teach them everything that they were supposed to. But I go back to more. I think it was they were very low level, came to the United States, needed to make money, and that's the way they decided they were going to make money.
I agree with you, because the high level martial artists in China could easily make a living in China. So why would he need to come to America to make a better living? No, I'm already making a good living.
Right.
Those guys were, if they're, you needed something guarded, it's still the old days. Oh, you got to hire somebody, and you have to hire somebody reputable. So that way bandits, when they see you, like Deng Hai Chuan, Bagua, he was not a nice guy. But he was not a nice guy. And when you see his flag, everybody know, don't mess with that guy because he's not a nice guy. You mess with him, sure, you might take that shipment, but he will hunt you down, hunt your family down, hunt your neighbors down. And so don't mess with that guy. Go rob somebody else. So that's why they would run around with their flags. You see the flag, let him go. Because you're sure, you don't know the guys guarding. They might be super good, they might not. So you might take it, you might not. But the guy whose banner they're flying is going to hunt you down because he's crazy. He doesn't care. You know what I mean? He'll search for you for 2 years.
Different country.
Because that's the old school, that's the way it is traditionally does it. Everybody's people too are like, oh, martial art is not Arnold. Quick story. You know, martial art is honorable. No, it's not. When I did Bagua with Juba Jin, who is Wen Jingming's classmate, he studied with Lo Chun Li, and then later on with Herjin Kwa, one of the guys who taught like a lot of people who do Bagua now.
Okay.
But one day we would go have a beer, and he's close to in his mid to upper 80s, and we're just having a beer. Really old school. He was hunted during the Cultural Revolution. He was a martial arts hunted
Oh, they
for.
were hunting him.
Yeah, they were hunting him. He was never caught to do that because he would just like he's like he didn't marry until after the Cultural Revolution. So because he didn't tie down, he was like, I wouldn't stay anywhere once. I knew they were hunting me because they were after us. He goes, they hunted Wen Jingming, persecuted him. He was like, I didn't want to do that. One time, quickly, one time, he was like, the whole thing is I saw him reflecting, and I was like, I had to translate, you okay? He's like, never use this in violence. And me being a smartass and knowing what he came from, I was like, but master, you've killed people with this. And then he was just like, he goes, yes. He goes, but you saw me staring out. I see their faces. And I wonder if there's a consequence that I'm getting older. If, being I wasn't really a strict Buddhist, but now believing a little bit in Buddhism, and maybe there is an afterlife or you're going to come back. He goes, I wasn't nice to people. I took people's lives. He told us one story where they, because he was being persecuted, he came out of a home of a relative, and he comes out and there's 3 guys there. One has a rifle, one has a paper, which later on the guy turned it and it's my face on a piece of paper because they're hunting me, and the other guy has a broadsword. And he goes, and I see the rifle, and then he's like, I am dead. He goes, the guy has a rifle right on me, so I'm going to die because there's no way he's got a rifle trained on me. There's no way I'm going to survive this. They're going to just kill me. He goes, but the guy showed me the paper and they all stepped forward. And I knew that when they stepped forward, they wanted to take me alive and condition me to be a communist, to try to brainwash me. And, they do their whole thing, deny you food and you don't sleep, and they change your mental being,
Right.
and he goes, so I knew they weren't going to do that. They wanted to take me alive. He goes, so I pushed the rifle out of the way when the guy took a step, and he goes, and I punched him in the throat, and he goes, and I heard the neck snap from how dense he hit that. He hit this guy here. He shot up, and he goes, I shot up and hit the next guy, and then he flipped backwards, and I turned to the other guy, and the other guy ran off. He goes, but he goes, that first guy, he goes, for sure I killed. When I heard that, I knew that his neck was not, he wasn't braced. He was didn't really know what he was doing, probably never trained in martial arts, and just out thinking he'd get a bounty for it. He goes, but He goes, that's one of the faces I see, you know. He goes, so don't use it in violence. I don't want you to be haunted. So he was telling me that because he was kind of me, but it wasn't like he was a peaceful guy, you
Right.
know. You know, martial arts really doesn't teach you peace directly. You can make full circle and realize, like, man, maybe I should have been nicer, or maybe I should have been a better guy, or some, you know, whatever it is. But it's not really this peaceful, meditative way people are thinking.
Yeah, I think that's a big misconception. Like when people, because of what's been uh, promoted in the Chinese martial arts, even in Tai Chi, oh, it's peaceful, and you're like, well, okay, how peaceful is it when I'm training to like poke you in the eye or, strike you in the throat, snap your arm, grab your neck a certain way and break it, there's what's peaceful about that? And that's where I also say, with knowledge comes responsibility.
Yeah,
You have to be responsible. And going today, why is traditional martial arts being overrun by the MMA? Well, because killing somebody has consequences in today's society. Doesn't matter where you are. Doesn't matter what culture, what country. We're in a modern society. This isn't back in the feudal times where I could kill you and nobody knew who I was, or
yeah.
nobody knew
Or
that I
or
killed you.
or want to hire you.
Yeah.
Kill that guy. Oh man, I want to hire you. You
Right.
know, guard
So
my store. Yeah,
different,
guard my
totally
store. You
different,
know.
totally
Yeah,
different time,
yeah,
and so you don't get the what's the word I'm looking for, or phrase. You don't get that reality of it anymore because of the we live
yeah.
in a society of laws, and for the most part, I've said in some of the other interviews, I think one of the big degradations to traditional martial arts is that we in civil liability when we look at the Mac dojos.
Hmm.
So you had the old, because I remember back, in the when I started in the '80s and the '90s, looking at some of these old school, martial artists, they used to bang back in the day. I mean, they were fighting, they were like beating the shit out of each other. Hardly any pads or any of that kind of stuff. And today you see them, and they're fighting, and they got big bubble suits on, like the kids and all that kind of stuff. And so I think that civil liability in the United States had a lot to do with the degradation of traditional martial arts being taught because you can't teach it because you're afraid of getting sued.
Yeah,
I poked
yeah,
somebody in the eye by accident during training. Next thing you know, I'm getting sued. I broke somebody's finger in training and I'm getting sued. And
yeah,
so you have a lot of that degradation of training. So that's one of my things that I see.
yeah. It's and it too. Uh, Having then with knowing that stuff, you know, for us as traditional martial artists right now, having a school, you know, you can't be doing that. People don't want to get beat up or stuff like, and you got to pay rent for the school. I don't want, you know, that money coming out of my pocket, or, you
Right,
know, because otherwise it's not practical to
right,
teach. So you have to, you know, you really have to water it down. You know, you try the best you can, but there's, you know, the traditional martial arts, it's hard to find somebody who would really want to embrace the whole thing, you
right,
know. So for me, I teach them the old ways, and I still do like general conditioning, so I still can hit things relatively hard and show them, like, oh, if we're going to hit this, you know, I have beams in the school that are wrapped with rope, you know, so that way I could do bumping and I could do different
I've
things.
seen some of your videos where you
Yeah,
do.
so I do hit those, so that way they know that, oh, if you, and I tell them, if you ever wanted to really use this, this is what you have to do to use this. Right now, we're doing the Talu, and it's awesome that you're doing it, and it's awesome that you're supporting the school and being like that. But you cannot use this on the street unless you do this, because otherwise you're not going to fare well.
Right, it's not
And
gonna
yeah, yeah,
work.
but I give them that suggestion. Meaning, like, if you really want to do it for self-defense, this is what you have. This is what this requires. You shouldn't, you know, so you know it. Sure, it might work on somebody who doesn't know martial arts. So you'll be able to defend yourself. But this stuff is really not made to defend yourself in the way you think. It's made to take lives.
Right.
In the end, that's what it was for back in those days. That's what it was for warring.
Well, that I remember the why one of the reasons why I wanted to view you, and also that I know you've done sports, but I know a big part of your training has been traditional, because I know you've competed in China in the sports arena, but I also know that you've trained traditionally. So you were showing me the two handed Jin, where you were talking about how to duck your head under, and you were able to explain why, and how it was protecting your vital areas, and able to get around. And that's always stuck with me, is like you understood the nuance of why we were doing that, why you did that a particular way. So just
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more about some of that, because I haven't.
Yeah. Well, that is because it's old school contemporary wushu, meaning like because we came from Wen Jingming, who was really traditional. But then when the Chinese government was like, hey, turn this in so that the general population can learn it, but don't water it down enough so that they can't uprise and throw us out of power. so so his first group was, our instructors was that first group who learned contemporary wushu, but still had that practical side. Everything. Oh, when you do zatsu, oh yeah, you could block, break the arm, pick up the leg, and as he's falling, you use the elbow and then you smash. And this is his head. So you're bracing his head and smashing his face. So they would learn all that, the applications and stuff, and not necessarily do the extreme practice of it. But our instructors knew every movement. There was a reason for every movement. You see a lot of people, oh, go like this, and then starting the Shaolin form.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But what they don't tell you is, oh, you go to reach under their rib cage, and then they grab your hands to block it. So you pull your hands briskly away and you hit them in the kidneys. So even this, oh, that has martial art practicality, but if you're not explained, you don't really know. So we are fortunate to come from a place where that was still being taught. So when I learned contemporary wushu, all the fancy jumps, butterfly kicks, butterfly twist, aerial cartwheel, all that stuff, my instructor showed me the practicality of that, of where that came from. Not that it was done exactly like that, but butterfly kick. Oh, if they poke you with a staff or spear, oh, the way you grab it and you go to kick them, and when they pull their head away to dodge the kick, you can pull their staff away. And then, and you're like, oh, so it's not just a fancy
Mm-hmm.
movement. It one era that survived because it had practicality. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of but now, I would say, man, they're changing the techniques a lot. They're really watering down the martial art uh, component of contemporary wushu, more jumping, acrobatic stuff. Back in the day, it was, sure, they did acrobatic stuff, but it was more, if you look at it from a military standpoint, meaning, you got the guys who are the spearhead and they cut through you, but the guy behind you hits you again. So, when you get hit by this guy, there's two guys and you're going to get hit by this guy, and then it's continuing. Nobody's really fighting one-on-one.
Right.
You know what I mean? You're going like this. If you block here, my friend stabs from underneath your armpit and stabs you with a sword in the heart. You're fighting in tangent with a group of people. So when you look at that, they're like, oh, that's why people are jumping. You know what I mean? My friend is hitting you in the knee, so I have to jump over him and chop your head off. So that's why you have like the fancy jumps, because really, if I jump in the air, single fighting, if I do a jump kick, one-on-one, chances are you're going to snatch it out of the air. You're going to slam me into the floor.
Well, that was
But
when you look at rope dart. It was
yeah,
used to for unhorsing people. That's what it was
yeah,
used
yeah,
for. I'm throwing a retractable bullet that I can unhorse you and then
yeah,
bring you down. It wasn't
yeah,
a lot of that stuff in Pudao. The Pudao horse cutter. Well, it was
yeah,
used for cavalry. They were to take off. They had that so they could hold and chop horse legs off.
yeah.
But I can also
Because
fight human with it.
yeah, everything had a overall, again, but they're military.
Right.
Meaning I had a rope dart, but there's an archer, and there's a guy with a spear, and a guy's with a sword, and there are guys with a double broadsword, and we know how to fight as an army together.
Right. In
You know,
unison.
and that is lost in like the traditional understanding. We think like one-on-one fighting. No, no, it's not really. Sure you can do that, but that's not why it was designed. Like the crazy way you see forms going on or sets going on. You're like,
Right.
oh, the jumping. Well, yeah, well, you got to jump. You don't want, you're this guy's attacking low, so you have to attack high. So sometimes you have to jump. Because there's 2-on-1, 5-on-1, 100 on 50, 1,000 on 3,000. It's
Right.
China. I want to take your shit. I don't want you to take my shit. So now you got thousands of guys fighting.
Um, let's move into another part. I found out I didn't when I met you. I didn't know, but you had educated or told me and found out that you were part of the ColecoVision Mortal Kombat. I think it's your brother, correct, that got you involved in that, Carlos?
Actually, my uh, a friend of his like approached me. I did some stunts for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 and 3. So uh, I already knew him. John Tobias approached me and said, "Hey, I have an idea." Because when we were younger, we were like geeks. He wanted to film like a kung fu movie. He had a camera. He got a camera and he wanted to film us doing kung fu moves. So that idea stuck with him. And later on, he's like, he was working for Midway Games. He wanted to do a video game called, we didn't have a title. And at the time, he was like, hey, he goes, you do martial arts and I have this idea. And together we can create this video game. We can pitch it to a company I work for. So I choreographed some moves and got some ideas together along with him. And we presented this package to actually the guy who's in charge of the franchise right now, Ed Boon. We approached him and said, hey, this is our idea of a fighting game. Originally, he said no, too. Originally, that guy, he was just like, because, too, I can understand it. It's about making money. And
Right.
he's like, well, I'm going to invest in you. Nobody knows you. Nobody's done this idea before. We're going to invest a little money in this. It's a big chance. I don't think it will make money. He basically right. But later on, he did. So, during that pitch, I was going to figure out the moves to make the game. When we were pitching the ideas, I got to give the idea of using the Chinese Lin Kuei because I'm heavily into Chinese martial arts. I was like, guys, we have to use we got to take the ninjas that you want and change them to Chinese Lin Kuei. And they were like, well, what's that? And then so I told them who they were, what they look like. They don't look like a Japanese ninja. There's nothing wrong with Japanese ninjas, but it is the 90s, early, it's 1990. Everything is Japanese ninja. I
Right.
want to make a really unique game, even though it's not going to be big. So I want the Lin Kuei in it. This guy's later on, I gave Scorpion the rope dart, like we talked about. Scorpion has a rope dart because it was a weapon that I really enjoyed doing. And I was like, oh man, it's that whole thing at the time. Not many people were doing rope dart in the U.S. And I was like, who would ever thought of that? To think of, you attach some leather to a big knife and you wrap it around your body and you're trying to pull the horseman off a horse. That's freaking. That's just a crazy idea, but it worked hundreds of times because otherwise
It
that
exists.
technique, yeah, would have died with the practitioner because that's the consequences back then. If your martial arts didn't work back in those days, you died with it. So I got to be part of creating this franchise that still is going on today. It's 30 years, and they're going to make a 12. So they come out with movies and stuff like that, and it's cool for me to see people acting like me. I got people in the first movie acting like guys I used to compete with, acting like basically what I created, acting like me, and now 30 years later, I see, Scorpion and Sub-Zero on the screen, and I'm like, man, that's pretty cool. People are still acting like you. It's a good feeling.
Did your brother was involved in video gaming, I believe, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's Raiden. Till this day, he's still with the franchise, developing the franchise. So he does all the motion capture work.
Okay.
And to along with me, actually everyone from the first game except for the girl studied traditional Chinese martial arts together.
Mhm.
So a lot of them, Liu Kang, is a big Chinese martial art guy. Kano is a big Chinese martial art guy. He really studied a lot of 7-star praying mantis.
Hmm.
So whenever you look at any of your listeners, whenever you look at Kano and you're a big 7-star praying mantis guy, love that guy because yeah, he really enjoyed. Uh, he has some movements in the game from mantis. You know,
I
so
thought
yeah.
that was pretty interesting when we met. I was like, how cool. How cool. Well,
Yeah,
Ninja Turtle stuff, how'd you get involved with that? How'd that happen?
I was competing at a tournament called Battle of Atlanta in Atlanta, Georgia. At the time, was one of the biggest
Yep.
tournaments in North America. And when we were competing, somebody said, "Hey, there's people looking for somebody to make a movie." So myself, I was competing, and Hosung was there, and the guy who did Kano, Rich Divisio, was there, and we were like, if we get approached with the movie, we should tell them that we know other guys who are really good to take a look at, for the movie. So they approached Hosung, guy who played Liu Kang for the Turtle movie, and he was like, "Oh, you guys watch my friends." So all of a sudden, we wound up going to North Carolina and auditioning for. They wouldn't tell us what movie it was until we got there, and then we signed a non-disclosure, and I found out that this was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, and they're looking for uh, stunt guys, martial arts stunt guys, because it was still at the day when there was not a lot of safety. So it wasn't like today where actors can do their own stunts.
Right.
No, it was like you had to know your stuff to do stunts back in those days because you're still getting punched in the face, because you guys got this big head on a suit. They could only see like this far away from their face, whatever is directly in front of you. So they're launching kicks, and then we have to see the kick coming and jump in front of the kick to take the blow. And they're not pulling it. So even though it's foamy, you're getting kicked in the face, you're getting punched in the face. If they have a weapon,
Uh-huh.
they're swinging it around. Sure, it's not all wood. It's a piece of wood wrapped in foam. You're still taking
Still
a whack.
feeling
Yeah, it's not putting you down, but you're like, oh, that's smart, but it's all for the movie. And so, they would come to this tournament looking for people who had martial art experience to be in the movie. So, that's back in those days, that's the way it rolled. So got to be in that movie, filmed for 4 months in North Carolina for that one. Later on, for Turtles 3 was like a month up in Seattle,
it. Okay.
you know. Uh,
So you did two turtle movies.
yeah,
This is
yeah.
the older turtle movies, not the original turtle movies, not what we got today. Right.
Yeah. These are where the guys are in foam suits, kind of like Godzilla. There's a guy in a rubber suit. So yeah, these guys are in rubber suits, and we would put a mask on because that way we can do multiple stunts. So
Mhm.
that way I could run in here, get hit in the face, and then they'd cut that, and then I could run from here and get sidekicked, and they cut that. So it was kind of it was really cool to kind of be a part of that.
That's the three was the one Ernie Ray Jr. or whatever his name was.
Yeah, he was in all three. So I worked with him in number 2 and number 3.
Okay, I didn't know he was he a number one? I can't remember. I
Yeah,
remember he was the pizza guy in number two.
he was actually in a turtle suit for number 1.
Oh, he was. Okay.
Yeah, a stunt turtle suit. And two, when you look at the movie, there's like 8 stunt turtles, just
Hmm.
because they're on, because that way multiple scenes could be they're on this set shooting this, they're in here, the actors are shooting over here, so you got all this stuff going on. Yeah, I
Okay.
know the first one was some except for Ernie, there were 3 guys from Hong Kong who didn't want to come back after wearing this suit. They did not want to be a turtle again and working. They were like, no way. There's no. We don't want to do this again. So that's why they were looking for other people at this tournament because, it's just brutal, that brutal. And Hong Kong guys are freaking. Those
Yeah,
stunt
they're
guys
pretty
are
tough.
hard. Yeah, those guys are tough. You know. But they were like, nah, we don't want to do this because it's just not. You're constricted so much, and I think when I was talking to Ho, later on, he was saying he was fluctuating in weight 20 pounds
Wow.
from wearing the
Just
suit.
sweating.
Yeah, sweating, constantly sweating and shredding, because you can't take the whole suit off. You could take the head off, but you still got the neoprene on your whole body. And so even when you're sitting down, and two, it's constricting you. You know what I mean? Because it's wet and it's
Breathe. Yeah.
constricting you. Yeah, you're freaking, it was, yeah. So those guys really, suffer way more than us. Sure, we were getting hit, but they were really, you know,
But those
sweating a
those
lot.
guys.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover for today on this interview. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Uh,
Thanks, brother. Just
tell
hanging out with you again.
uh, tell everybody you have a Facebook page that you do under Daniel Pesino, where you show and demonstrate a lot of your techniques and stuff that you do. Do you have any other things too, like a website or anything?
Yeah. Yeah. I have a Master Pesina .com is like the website, but mostly it's on Instagram, because Instagram could go to Facebook. So if you go to Instagram, masterpesina.com, at masterpesina, I mean, it'll lead you to the Facebook one. But I try to uh, you know cross stuff. So I show some of the traditional stuff, but to lighten it up, so I can increase my business, because everybody does not want to be a crazy nut like you and the people who are listening to this program. We wouldn't be making a living if we trained everybody like we were trained. There's no way. We would, we'd have one student, two students.
I saw you were doing the short staff. What's it called? The,
Bien gun. Bien short whip. Yeah,
yeah.
that's too. It's old school, and it's not practical until you see. You think like, oh, it's flowery, but no. In traditional martial arts, there was nothing flowery, because you would die.
Well,
The
that's like when people see this, they don't realize, what how it actually attacks
yeah,
they don't get it. You can throw a
yeah,
jab at me, and I can that quick and whap you in the nose, and
yeah,
from that, just learning that
yeah.
flower move.
Yeah, yeah, or even if they really look at it, it's like, oh, I grab the punch coming in, I get it in the wrist lock, and now I have it in a wrist lock with this hand, and I whack you in the hand with this hand while I'm breaking
That's
your
from
wrist.
the fun zoo,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. Our lineage.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's cool to explore. Not you don't have to embrace violence, but it's like a puzzle. And once you start doing like learning forms, you can really be like, oh man, I could find like if you stay with it long enough. Our instructor once told us, if you find 10 applications for one technique, your kung fu's no good. If you find 100 for one technique, your kung fu's okay. If you find 1,000 for one technique, your kung fu is really good. And that is really true. If you just put in the practice, you can find out, like, you can use it so many different ways.
And that's where we were talking about the ABC 1, 2, 3, and you're learning your forms. That I need to learn many different applications for this particular set of movements, how I can apply them, how they can be applied in different ways. And of course, there is no magical one technique, no magical one thing that's going to
Yeah, yeah.
be,
Embrace everything.
yeah,
Try to, if you don't think it makes sense, really explore why it makes sense. Don't take anything on face value.
yeah.
Like like I was saying with the Tung Bei guy. He was like, if you just look at him, you'd be like, what the heck is this guy? His shirt's raggedy. He's got his trousers up to here. He's walking, kind of pulling a little thing with a little wobble on it. It was like so ridiculous to see him coming, that he is not what he looks like. If he hauled off and hit you or kicked you or grappled with you, you would be in a hell of pain.
Well, that gets into a whole total different thing. So when you look at that particular one person, did he get married? Did he work the normal job? Did, his mindset? He dedicated his whole life to training to where he didn't. His pants being up here, he didn't. It
Yeah,
was not okay. I have them up here because I want to make sure they don't fall down so I can kick.
yeah,
You know, So the whole mindset was a different type of mindset of those type of people. You know, today
Yeah,
you have the imagery of it, and the societies that we live in. You know, we have to work, we have to make money to pay rent. May have family and wives and things like that that we have to deal with, or children. So it's total different, you know, mindset of those type of people. Even when Wen Jingming, I think he didn't marry his wife.
yeah, Liu Yihua.
I don't think he married her until later. He was older, like much older.
Yeah, he's way older than her. But too, she was a badass. She was like,
Stories.
there's videos of her in her 80s doing double broadsword. Who the and she's moving pretty good. And people got to remember she's 80 and she's like freaking. That's really impressive. You know?
She was apparently a little bit of a badass too.
Yeah, yeah. She took challenges. Yeah. Well, back in those days, you had to. If you're going to do traditional martial arts, you had to put up or shut up.
Yep. So, well, thank you, Daniel Pesina, Master Pesina. Thank you very much for coming on. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video, and we'll keep talking afterwards.